So this is what we're doing.
Well, I guess we're live now, so I guess I have to, right? Hello, everyone. This is what we're doing. We have two people in this call. We're exploring some awesome questions today, and we're deep diving into two really important questions that I think are going to affect everybody here, everybody watching, and everybody who's not watching. If you're watching this, please share this video with people that you think would be interested. If you aren't watching this, I'm sorry. I hope you get the link.
Hashtag questions... replay in the comments.
and put replay in the comments. That'll be helpful. Put live in the comments too if you're live. That'll also be helpful. I'd love to know who's here and who's here later. We're going to explore two awesome questions, and I'm not sure if I remember the format, but that's okay. Yay, autism. These questions are: why do the vast majority of people at all income levels feel like they need more money to be 100% satisfied? And how can scarcity breed abundance? So somebody else say something.
Well, I mean, let's just start with like an initial answer on that first question. Well, first of all, I think like each of us comes from a very different angle, right? So like I'm a coach. I focus on people with creative, chaotic, nonconformist minds, and I'm a life and business strategist. And so I'm approaching it from this holistic angle, not just holistic health, but I mean like holistic whole life kind of angle. Whereas you guys are coming from completely different points of view based on your expertise. You want to share what that is?
Casey, why don't you go first?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've didn't follow this path specifically, in life. It just kind of came to me through life experience and things. But essentially, I've found myself through the last 10 years or so in varying levels of financial scarcity. And only because of my ability to see the train coming, essentially, and Olay multiple times, was I able to survive it financially and develop a system or a program, whatever you want to call it, to help not only myself avoid the train consistently, but I've been able to help close to 24 clients of mine maintain the same kind of status going forward in their lives. So it's mostly financial, but I mean, scarcity comes in many, many different forms other than just financial. So
awesome. That was really well spoken. And I apologize ahead of time because I'm going to do my best, but you really just abbreviated the heck out of that. So for me, it's a little different. As everybody, well, maybe not everybody, because we're streaming to you guys' page too, but everybody on my side of things knows I'm autistic and ADHD. And for most of my life, I had no idea what scarcity was. One day I felt scarce, another day I didn't. But if you said, what is scarcity? I couldn't connect to that. All I knew is that I couldn't trust myself because I had one perspective one day and I would wake up the next morning and look at that and say, what the hell was I thinking? So I had to go through a long process of figuring out all of those patterns. And the reason why at some points I felt like I had to go and buy 3 pounds of chicken wings to eat in one night just to feel good. And at another point, I was totally willing to save all of my money and be committed to the long-term game. And what were the dynamics at play in both of those situations? And how did the common theme of being willing to save to show up for something bigger and then doing something ultimately self-sabotaging, how did those two things connect? Because they had to be connected. I'm in one body and I'm having some kind of experience, right? Where those two things are both true at different times. So what are those relationships? And what I learned is that scarcity is inherent in life. We have only so much time. We can compartmentalize only so much information at once. I'm not going to go too deep down the rabbit hole there, but it's safe to say that because we can only hold so much in our heads at once, our mind is constantly trying to deal with the influx of information and do something effective. And all of those relationships, I've identified, depending on the context, between 15 and 25 different factors that our mind's trying to work with. All of those relationships need to somehow be symbolized, abbreviated, and understood by our brain. And that inherently is the scarcity of being alive. Now, the question is, what's the solution? And I think somebody's needs to mute their computer. I think the solution has to be like, it's not about more money, right? Like this question, why do the vast majority of people at all income levels feel like they need more money? Well, because they don't want to feel that constriction of scarcity. But they're living a lie. That lie is the fact that we inherently have limitation. So what do we do with that? And how do we feel good about that is the question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think there's a big element of like modern business practices and marketing. You know, there are like millions, probably billions, I don't know the statistics, spent on basically figuring out how to manipulate each one of us into spending our money on their business, you know, and all of us engage in it. Like, it sounds very, you know, like conspiratorial when I say it that way, but I mean, all of us have businesses. We have to learn marketing. We have to know the best way to communicate what we offer. And I mean, you know, like the stereotypical example of car ads putting attractive women on them, even though that has nothing to do with the car. You know, so there are all these psychological tricks being implemented on us to get us to want more, to make us think that we need this thing to be happy, to make us think that we're lacking something. And so there's that like scarcity mindset part of it built in, that I think if we're not very mindful of the way we approach our spending and mindful of what our desires are, like our true desires that come from within ourselves versus the desires that come from conditioning, then it's just this never-ending hamster wheel of wanting the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, when often we either have what we really want, or what we want is something that needs to come from within us. You know, us changing our own state, us finding peace within ourselves, as opposed to searching for it from something on the outside.
So what about the situation when we know that we want something and we know that something's more important, and all that social conditioning that you're talking about, or all the marketing and the sales and the media that we experience, especially around the holiday season in America, at least?
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to the situation where, hey, I know I want something, or hey, I didn't know I want something, but now I know that I want it, and it sort of rises to the top? What can we do with that?
That's a really good question. And I think the first thing is to wait. So, you know, as we've talked about, there can be environments in which, you know, compulsive spending might be okay or favorable. In general, I think because all of this, you know, marketing psychological magic is being like used to get us to behave in a certain way, I think detaching from that is really helpful for me. And so a lot of times I ask, well, the first thing I always ask myself when I'm tempted to make a purchase that I didn't like intend on making before, you know, like it's one thing if I'm like, I'm out of toothpaste, I'm going to go to the store and buy toothpaste. And then I get there and I'm like, ooh, look at this other thing on the side, right? So when I see the other thing on the side, it's like, well, wait a minute. Did I need that before I saw it? Was my life lacking before I saw it? Or is this just being created here? Right. And then it's okay. Sometimes we see something that we had never thought of that could actually make our life better. And so for me, usually I'll separate. And if I'm still thinking about it a week later, like if I feel like, you know, I approached the situation in my life in which I would have liked having it, I'm like, God, I wish I had that thing. Like once that happens a couple times, I just go back and order it on Amazon or go back to the store. So personally, I don't do it in the moment.
That's a really, really good point in terms of waiting, because experience breeds desire. Like, to have an experience where you don't have something creates the desire for it. So Casey, what do you think?
Yeah, I think Nicole makes an excellent point when it comes to waiting and not just. I think that in general in society we have this instant gratification problem, whether it's with sugar or food or any number of other things that that come up on the television when ads are playing. The marketing machine is very, very strong, and they spend, I'm assuming it's billions, if not hundreds of billions a year on marketing across everything else. But like I've often asked myself the question, and we just had the Super Bowl, if Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Budweiser did not spend money on an ad, do you really think that their bottom line would see any blip if they didn't have a Super Bowl commercial? Are there really people out there who don't see or don't know or recognize those brands? Like, just a question. But in general, other than that, what I find myself doing is, if I come across a product or something along those lines that I think would be valuable to me, I start to analyze it from how is this going to improve the current status of my life? Is it going to save me time? Is it going to save me money? Is it going to save me, is it going to improve my emotional state in a significant enough way past 5 minutes after I open the box? In which case, okay, then we'll visit that, in the next few days or next week or something along those lines. Or my favorite thing is to put it on a list or something in Amazon. And if it's not something that I absolutely need, but it's like, that would be cool to have because I'd like to do something with it, then I wait to see whether that thing goes on sale for 20, 30, 40% off on some kind of random sale that they have for no good reason, and then make a purchase. Like, I didn't really need it, but I really did want it. And then under those circumstances, I'm willing to pull the trigger and actually purchase it. Sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't, but it just depends. And I think it's really understanding yourself and where those value exchanges come in, because if it's not time, money, or mental or emotional state improving in some way, shape, or form, it's almost like buying a really expensive luxury car that is going to tank in value as soon as you drive it off the lot, but people do it anyway.
Right. So how do we wait?
Better do you really feel after you buy a Lexus? I don't know. I've never owned a Lexus, but maybe people who have 16 zeros in their bank account can answer that question.
Maybe. So how do we wait then if we feel like I talk to people a lot of the time who are miserable and they say, I need relief. I need to have something go right. I have no faith in myself. And they're jumping from thing to thing. And it's very clear what's going on. So how do we create abundance from that state?
That's such a good question. And when that state is coming from within, like you feel that in the core of your being, there are certain situations in which the answer is something from the outside, right? For example, if you need to work 3 jobs and get 3 to 4 hours of sleep a night to support your family, then being able to get a job with a jump in income, so you only need to work 1 job, reasonable hours, will make a big difference to your desperation for relief. So yeah, when there are basic needs involved, sometimes the answer does come from the outside, and sometimes that is the only thing you can do to answer that need, unless you want to get to the level of being like a monk, right? Like if you're hungry, I mean, not just, oh, I haven't eaten in 4 hours, I'm hungry. I mean, like if you're malnourished, like having trouble meeting your basic need for food, unless you're on the level of a very elite meditation mindfulness practitioner like a monk, your feelings of well-being won't be the same unless you eat. Same with medical care, chronic pain. Yes, you can train to the point where the impact of these are lessened. And the average person living a normal life can make a lot of progress, but to completely eliminate that is a whole other thing. And then there are the cases where it's looking for a dopamine hit, right? So it's like, I feel like everything's going wrong. And so I want that beer, that glass of wine, that shopping binge, that something just to get that hit of something feeling good. that's a completely different problem. And that's one where I think going to the source of the problem is a much more effective route than doing something that, I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing stuff that makes you feel better if it's not damaging, right? Like if you have the money to spend and it'll make you feel better because you just enjoy shopping, like there's nothing wrong with that. There's no judgment. But I think when it gets to the point of being a vice where it makes you feel better, but it's harmful in the long term, or you temporarily feel better and then you feel worse, that's the one where I think trying to avoid it and look within and find other strategies can be helpful.
What you just said is kind of equivalent to, if you're broke, don't take out a loan to get what you need. It's very theoretically and logically sound, and I love it because it's true. It's accurate. Like that's the goal. That needs to be what we accomplish. And I think, Casey, you're a great person to have in this. Casey has entered the chat. You're a great person to have in this chat because, like, I don't know many people that can buy a house in cash. And I don't know many people that can buy a car in cash. And I'm sure they feel like they need it and that thing would help them have relief, but then they're locked into future commitments and future obligations in much the same way that I would be locked into being unhealthy for eating 3 pounds of chicken wings in a night. So how can we...
I mean, we could argue the health ramifications of 3 pounds of chicken wings. But
I mean, it was after an intense leg day, I'm just saying. But
yeah, I mean, I also think those are like slightly different, right? Because there's a cost benefit analysis. And
is
so
there? Or is it emotional?
I mean, it depends. I feel like with a car or a home, there could be. Whereas when I'm talking about a strict dopamine hit, I'm not thinking, oh, let me invest in something that will have long-term value in my life. I'm thinking,
right. So then how do we wait?
So how do we wait? That's, I think, I mean, I could go on a rant about that. I think that's more the inner work. So for example, one of the first things to start with would be being willing and practicing sitting with and observing that discomfort instead of acting on it. And so I'm not saying, so first of all, this is a practice, right? I'm not saying like you should be able to do this immediately after you hear me describe it on this live broadcast. It's not that. It's a practice. And of course, there are going to be times where you're like, okay, this still isn't going well. I'm going to go for my vice. And like, I have vices that I occasionally give into, and I don't feel like I do so to the point that I regret them, but like comfort, okay. So I think sitting with the discomfort is the first step, and doing that cost benefit analysis. Like, is this actually going to hurt me? Right. So like having a pint of Ben and Jerry's every night for years is going to harm your health. Having a pint of Ben and Jerry's, the one night after you lost a close family member, when you normally eat an extremely healthy diet, very different, right? Cost benefit analysis. But yeah, so when I'm talking about the inner work, that's the type of thing I'm talking about. And that's where I would start, is being able to sit with and observe that discomfort without acting on it, and being very gentle with yourself when you have trouble resisting the urge and you act on it anyway, because that's part of the practice. It's like trying to shoot a basketball. You're not going to get it in every single time. So the practice would be trying not to act on it immediately and just observe. And sometimes you'll do well at that and sometimes you won't. And eventually you'll be able to do that most of the time.
That makes sense. And I know people still who have struggled and struggled and struggled. Like my mom was a good example. Part of my story is that I watched her, she was on disability her entire life, and I watched her do the same stuff from the age of being aware of it till I left the house. So there has to be some way to always be doing better. And I think, Casey, this is where you come in. How can we do that?
Well, I mean, like Nicole said, there's a number of ways that it can be done, but the first thing is recognizing that you have a problem of some kind, whether it's health related or emotional related or whatever. But I mean, in the grand scheme of things, what you're talking about is that pattern of behavior that eventually becomes some type of an addiction, whether it's shopping, whether it's food, whether it's binge watching Netflix with a pint of Ben and Jerry's. I mean, just could be a result of any number of things. You could be unhappy at work. You could be unhappy with your current physical condition. But it starts with recognizing I'm in a pattern that's going to leave me feeling like this on repeat for the rest of my life. And sometimes it takes a close friend or family member bringing attention to it and saying, hey, are you doing all right? And you being really honest with yourself about whether you're doing all right or not. As someone who went through divorce and developed some less than favorable habits during a few years worth of that type of suffering, the one thing that I was really able to anchor everything else into was staying the course with the diet that I had chosen that I felt the best on, even though there were other things that I was bringing in to kind of make me feel better in that moment or on that day. I made sure not to make it a long-term situation with any of those, so that I wasn't going to have to worry about long-term health ramifications or any number of other things. But if you don't take the time to consider what pattern you're creating on a regular basis, it's very, very easy to find yourself in a situation where you're buying a bag of Lay's potato chips every week and eating them when you could be eating any number of other things, or finding something else to fill that time with.
And if we need salt and vinegar, where do we go? I'm kidding. If so, for you, it was about sticking to a diet, right? That's what one of your commitments that you made to improve yourself over time. How did you know that it was, aside from looking in the mirror or maybe noticing your inner state, like was there something that you did or some specific that told you, yes, I'm on track, even when the negative voice, negative self-talk, if that was a thing for you, came up?
Yeah, so I would say, just in general, like with my particular story in that situation, I got hit with like 4 or 5 really not favorable things happening externally, one right after another, over about a 6 to 8 month period. And it was impossible not to look in the mirror and say, what did I do that helped cause this? Because I don't think that anybody really believes that they are completely perfect and don't contribute in some way, decision making wise, to the current state of their life or their health or any number of other things. But when I lost my mom at a relatively young age, for her and for me, because the women in my family typically live until their mid 90s, and she didn't make it to 70. That was one of those moments where I recognized that not only did I lose my mom at 32, but I just watched my marriage collapse. I was at my heaviest actual weight ever. And all of these things may or may not specifically be related, but I have 3 little boys to be an example to. And I better get my what together. So it turned into let's figure out the answers to all these questions and whether they're connected or not. And so the biggest piece was, I want to make sure that I'm not leaving my kids at the age of 30. So it was very, very easy for me to get hyper focused on a diet that not only made me feel better, but that would consistently help me pull the weight off. And so that was really, the anchor that kind of pulled everything in, because when I started focusing on that and I started feeling better in general, the other decisions and things like that started to become easier, and I was getting a lot of cathartic types of experiences with my kids and close family and stuff along those lines. So it was just kind of feeding into this nice little wave of positivity that started several years ago.
So you were able to sort of compound your efforts by consistent effort. Did you ever measure your weight or measure your food or do anything specific to know unequivocally?
So the diet, I was on a ketogenic diet, so the only thing that I really had to track was how many carbs I'm eating in a day. So that was really easy. And for the most part, while I was on it, and this was like a 4-year period, which basically ended about a year and 2 months ago, maybe. I went from 210 pounds to 163. But it was, other than, you know, holidays and stuff along those lines, where I was going to family and I was like, oh, I'm having enchiladas today. But not making it a pattern to break the diet because I have this goal. It was just, you know, pretty consistent trend of weight loss. And that was, you know, all I really needed to be able to kind of continue it. It was,
Makes sense.
yeah.
I've done keto myself, and you can tell.
every other.
Yeah. What about you, Nicole? How would
Um,
you address this incremental change thing?
address incremental change.
Knowing that we're doing better.
Every single day.
Maybe. I mean, I'm thinking of the people who know that they're doing better aren't the ones that need all this advice.
So are you going back to like thinking about your mom, that example you gave? Like, is that where we're heading back to? Yeah, I mean,
that's the question I asked Casey. Casey, I'm curious how you respond to that same sort of juxtaposition.
yeah, so I was thinking about that because it was a really great example. And discipline is one part. So yes, getting better incrementally, I think, yes, it's just practice. And like the practice kind of looks like this. And it's hard to tell with this short little panel, but you're kind of going up and down here, and then slowly you're still going up and down, but you're like moving up over time. So I think understanding the process of habit formation, that, you know, falling off the wagon a lot is a stage, right? The first stage, you're either like procrastinating getting started because you're intimidated by the change, or you're like super enthusiastic, like, oh my God, it's January 1st. This is the year I get fit. I'm going to the gym every day, right? And then there's the next stage is where you're falling off the wagon a lot, right? And that happens because either it is intimidating and it's hard, and so you're falling off the wagon a lot, or you hyper focused on that, and you get to the point where you have to start bringing all the other elements of your life back that you sort of put on the back burner to hyper focus on this. And so now you're going through the process of, how do I weave this into my life without neglecting everything else? And so that's where there's this trial and error, and you fall off the wagon a lot, and it's just not habit, and it doesn't always feel good. When you get to the turning point where assuming this is a habit that benefits you, when you get to the turning point where you can feel the results, not just see them, right? You have to be able to feel the results, like the visceral, like body experience of feeling the difference, where when you slack, you feel worse. After that point, you still fall off the wagon, but it becomes a lot easier to get back on and to stay on. And then eventually it becomes a habit. So that's one part of it. But I think just like when you said that about your mom, it almost like hit me, you know, like that's a difficult experience to have, to know, like, I keep doing this thing and there's a problem, but I'm relying on this vice or this habit. And even though I know it's hurting me, and oftentimes people feel ashamed of it, or other people give them crap about it, and so it hurts their relationships, and yet still doing it anyway. And so in those situations, I think there's that deeper layer of, what hole is that habit filling? You know, so whether it's, you know, a food, like comfort food, or we're talking about money today, you know, that like sporadic shopping, or that, oh, I need to just buy this, or, oh, I'm going to go out and just do whatever I want and be spontaneous. Like what hole is that filling? What need is it filling? Because there is something that you're getting out of it, or you wouldn't be doing it, you know? And so figuring out what that is and what that hole is, and then there's the process. And I know that this isn't something where it's like, oh, now I know, it's so easy, I'm just going to fill it a different way. But like that is the ultimate goal. And there may be a lot to work through, right? Like, I'm not trying to oversimplify. It can be really difficult, especially if you're in a situation where basic needs aren't being met. It could be a long-term plan. It could be a 3-year or 5-year plan. I've had to do that before. But figuring out what is that hole, how else can I fill it, and then working on that, even if it is a long-term plan. and giving yourself grace along the way.
Is this why then most people feel like they need more money to be satisfied? Either of you, just throwing it out there. It seems like a good conclusion
I
to
mean,
that
I
question.
think that it comes down to the patterns that we form. Are we conditioning ourselves to buying the next thing that we see marketed on television or sent to us in the mail or sent in an email from Amazon or any of the other 50 million websites that are trying to get our attention at this point? Are we falling into the pattern of believing that that is actually going to satisfy whatever it is that we feel like is missing? Or looking towards what other solutions there might be from within that can balance out the levels of, hormones, dopamine, whatever, so that it's not like you don't get a significant change in circumstance by buying the newest cell phone or the newest car or whatever that looks like for them, and the next 18 pack.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
3 pounds of chicken wings.
Yeah.
So the second question seems to fit, right? And as you guys are talking, I'm coming up with kind of a sub question. So how can scarcity then, how can that hole that we have actually create abundance? Because it sounds like what we're saying is that we need to go inside and we need to figure out what hole that's filling, not take action, not resist, be disciplined, more scarcity, more limitation. And I understand, I know what you guys are saying, but people watching may not. So how, kind of the two parts are, how can scarcity actually breed abundance? And I don't know if, well, for what's coming up for me is how deep do we need to go to get to whatever the answer to that first part is, or do we? I'm posing the question.
So the answer could be very deep. For some people, it's just like, oh, this is manipulation. They're trying to get me to think I need this. I don't have to think I need this. I can think for myself. Ta-da, problem solved. Yay. And then for other people, it's like deep, going back into traumas. And so I don't think it's a standard answer. As far as how can scarcity breed abundance, for me, I think it's the main thing that did. And the reason for that is scarcity forces you to have to reflect on every single purchase you want to make, and then to go without things and to experience for yourself, oh, do I actually feel like that thing is missing, or did I just kind of forget about it until I saw another one or it came up somehow in my awareness? And going through that experience, right? For example, with Hurricane Sandy, I lost a bunch of things of sentimental value. And I realized after that, like, oh, having that thing under my bed and knowing it was there versus knowing it existed, but it not actually physically being there didn't actually make a difference to my happiness. Like, yeah, maybe when I was older, I would have pulled that stuff out. But today we have phones, we can take pictures of stuff. I don't take up as much space with that stuff. And so I don't feel like I need as much space to live in, which means I feel like my 2-bedroom apartment is the perfect size for me and my son. And what is that? That's abundance, right? Like, I don't want more. I don't want more to have to take care of. I don't want a lawn to have to mow. I don't want a roof to have to replace. Our condo is the perfect amount of space and freedom and responsibility based on my experience of going without those things,
Yeah. So what was the hole, and then what did you fill it with, following our theme?
Yeah. So for me, this was a case of the hole was conditioned. The hole wasn't really there. I was told there was a hole. I was told that I needed this, that it was important, that I should save this stuff of sentimental value. And for some people, maybe they should. That's the thing. We're all different, right? Just because it doesn't make a difference for my happiness and I'm just as happy with the memories and the photos doesn't mean that that has to be true for you or anyone else. But going through that process, realizing what did I have to go without, that I actually felt it. I felt the lack of freedom, the restriction, the inconvenience, the lack of joy in my life from going without it, versus what did I go without where I was like, I'm fine. Like, I don't have a car now. Could I afford a car? Yeah. Would it sometimes be better for me to have a car? Yeah. But and this comes to the other point about choosing the value of things for ourselves instead of what other people say it's worth. For me, if I were to value for myself, like, what is having a car and the convenience it would give me, the joy it would give me, what is that worth to me right now? Maybe $300 a month, $300 a month. Having a car in New York City, I'm going to spend like $1,000 a month between gas and insurance and, car payments, unless I bought a hoopty in cash. So, I was like, okay, what else could I do with that money? It was just a very clear decision for me that the slight improvement in my convenience or happiness from having a car wasn't worth all the traveling I could do if I didn't spend money on a car. That like experiences and adventure, that has always added to my happiness so much more than most other things. And again, I'm not saying it should be that way for anyone else. That's just me. That's what I've experienced. And so scarcity forced me to become crystal clear on exactly what did and did not actually matter to my feelings of happiness and fulfillment. So when my income got to a certain point where I was meeting my basic needs and had enough for the extras or the luxuries or the hobbies or the things that actually like make a difference to my happiness, it just got to this point where I was like, I don't need any more. I'm good. I'm fine. I feel like I have plenty. Like there would be like money just like adding up because I didn't feel the need to spend it. And I couldn't have achieved that state if I hadn't had the experience of scarcity, and if I hadn't become crystal clear, and if I didn't have the awareness of conditioning where I didn't just decide I needed stuff based on what society told me.
Yeah. So, Casey, do you have anything to add, or what has your experience been in this sort of transition for you?
Yeah, I mean, I can really resonate with a lot of that because I have always had or felt like certain items were of intrinsic value for sentimental reasons, whether it be birthday cards or a toy you got when you were 5 or like any number of things. It's memories. And because for the most part, not my entire life, but a good portion of it, I was raised by a single mom, so we didn't really have a lot of extra stuff. Like, I mean, there are stories that I could tell, but I won't. My mom would be very embarrassed about. But essentially, I grew up without a lot of things to begin with. And so we intrinsically learned to value what little we did have for, the purposes of memories or whatever. And so after losing my mom and after the marriage collapsing and multiple other things happening, it really was part of the process of figuring out, like, what is it going to take for me to get out of this hole that I'm in now? I'm depressed, sad. I'm, put a label on it. You're probably right. To dig myself out of this because I need to be out of this hole as fast as humanly possible. So I am looking at, what do I have in my possession that I don't need? What is not adding to my human experience? What am I not using to add to my children's human experience? And we were downsizing from a 4-bedroom to, I didn't know at the time, but it ended up being a 1-bedroom apartment. And I ended up putting a whole bunch of stuff in storage because I didn't have enough room to put any of that stuff in my apartment. And then as I slowly started to work through all of the, we'll call it childhood trauma, and worked with my kids on multiple different things, I started to notice significantly lower and lower and lower value out of all of those things that I was holding on to. And when it came to realizing that, there's a quote out there about, if you want to really transform your future in your life, you have to let the old stuff go. Like the past you has to, at least parts of it have to die, so that you can step into all of those different things that make up the person that you want to turn into. And that was one of the things that was required, was I have to let go of all these different things, because at the end of the day, they all reminded me of my mom, but they're taking up room in a box, and I'm paying extra money every month to hold on to these boxes of things that meant something to her, but they really didn't connect with me. And being ready and willing to say, I don't need these things anymore. I want to go create a life that I want with my kids, that my mom could never give me, and that they deserve, because they didn't ask for any of these circumstances to come up into their path. But being able to travel and teach them all of the things that my parents didn't know, never tried to learn, and that I was learning, was far more valuable than 62 boxes in a storage unit. So getting rid of all of those bits and pieces of the past life, the past me, the past all of those things, was just part of kind of recovering from that. And yeah, you learn just how much more simple things are. Like, yeah, it's great to have a box of 57 HDMI cables so that you always have an HDMI cable when you need one.
Isn't that abundance?
But it's also a scarcity mindset. Like, I have to keep this HDMI cable so I don't have to spend $15 or $20 on a new HDMI cable. Every freaking thing that you buy comes with a new HDMI cable. I don't know if you recognize this or not, but I mean, it used to be a thing of the past where it's like, you'd need to buy a separate USB-A cable, or you need to buy some extra whatever. Now they all come with it. One of those wonderful things about how things have developed. But I mean, I can't tell you. Yeah, it's annoying when you throw out that box of random cables or cords or whatever it is, and then the next week you need one of those. But how much mental strain was I putting myself through to keep this stupid box and move it to apartment to apartment to apartment for however long, over years. I mean, that box was probably 15 years old, and I've moved it through every house that I've had, and I've still only used 2 things out of it. Get rid of it. Get rid of it, because it's taking up rental space in your brain that it doesn't need to. I know there's going to be at least 2 people who are yelling at me for throwing away my cable box, but you know what? I'm happier.
Keep 1 or 2. Get rid of the box,
Yeah.
Just want
Chris,
1 or 2.
you have a completely different approach to all of these. I feel like Casey and I brought up like sort of these like, emotional, like, and you're like algorithms and spreadsheets.
I'm not though. That's the difference. So let me say one thing to you, Casey, and then it seems like we want to talk about me, which is cool. Casey, here's what's interesting about what you said, and then actually a question. The illusion of abundance in the moment is scarcity, is what you're saying, in a sense. If I were to generalize that whole thing, it's like I hold on to it so I have extra, but it creates a hidden cost. To your point, Nicole, about my algorithms and spreadsheets, it creates a hidden cost. And then so this question that we can go as deep as you want with is like, how did you become aware of that hidden cost? Because it's a hidden cost by its very nature.
Well, so I had a couple of coaches, and we talked through quite a few different things, but when it came to recognizing that all of the mental capacity that I had that was being tied up in moving that box around, or seeing that box, knowing that it existed and it causing discomfort within my body, to recognize that box is just something that I have to step over or move around or put all this, other energy into at some point in the future, really started to weigh down and keep me from being able to think about the things that I wanted to accomplish with the rest of my life. So it was, I have a box of 15 HDMI cables and 32 power chargers and however many whatever else was in there.
And so it's I just want to pause to your point, Nicole, because you're right at that great transition. So it's like, is the value of holding on to those cables worth the cost of not paying attention to this bigger picture? Would you
Yeah.
say that that's, yeah, good.
Yeah, the bigger picture is like, what can I create? What can I imagine and create out of the space that this is holding in my brain?
Yeah, out of that raw material. And that's the abundance that I think you were talking about, that Nicole was talking about, is this idea of allowing ourselves to be able to, rather than to hold on to for fear of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the abundance is like, if I need it, I can get it. I don't have to hold it. I don't have to control it. I don't have to be afraid of losing it. If I need it, I can get it.
And wow, what a great bridge. So I have a whole different story, as you brought up, and I'm just going to talk a little bit because we have all the pieces on the board. For me, and you guys don't know this who are watching, there's 5 people I can see watching. One guy, I'm just going to put this in the chat. One guy, when we were talking about eating chicken wings, one guy said this. Yeah, dad bods are in.
Yeah, I saw
so
that.
That's fun. But
That's my brother-in-law.
All right, well,
he's got like a 3-month-old at home.
Buy me some chicken wings, bro. All right, so here's the thing. For me, what I've been messaging back and forth, well, not really back and forth, I've just been kind of putting out in the private chat between Casey, Nicole, and I, is Casey's story isn't that dissimilar from mine. So, Nicole, you say, I have spreadsheets and algorithms. Yeah, I didn't start that way. The only reason I have spreadsheets and algorithms is because I have an incredibly analytical mind, and I recognize the limitation of all the shit, I was holding in my head, and the cost of holding it in my head, but I also recognize the value of that level of detail. So, Casey, it's kind of like if I take all those HDMI cables and instead of throwing them away, I have some kind of TARDIS where I can just press a button and have an HDMI cable. I wanted to not lose the value of the accessibility of all the detail, but at the same time, forget about it. And my background is in IT. So one of the things that everybody has experienced is new software comes out and is buggy. Like, it's really, really buggy. That's new software comes out and it's buggy. And then people will wait to use it. And then even then it's buggy. And there's all this presupposition of, well, it's been out for so long. Haven't we I'm going to put this comment on the screen and I'll respond to it in a minute. It's come out, it's been out for so long. Can't we get it right, guys? So to your point, Misty, this happens with food as well. If you grow up poor, this was a major life change for me. Thank you for mentioning such an important concept. Yeah, absolutely. And so it wasn't just HDMI cables. It was food. My mother was on disability. She only got $900 a month. And I would watch her do her budget every single time. And I'd watch us think we'd have food and not have food. That's why I ate 3 pounds of chicken wings when I had a little bit of extra, just being real. Somehow I thought that eating it all at once would be good. And as I've learned exercise and nutrition, it's not so good. That's beside the point. So what I had to realize is, I could take forever to tell my life story, but ultimately I got a salary job. I had fluctuating income. I had fluctuating moods, fluctuating energy, and I would enact myself in these behaviors. And I had to say, look, like, there's something I get out of, there's something I get out of doing that behavior, but then there's also some abundance that I feel when I don't do that addictive behavior. And so what's the difference? And it wasn't until I realized that I always have what I need when I need it, regardless of how many HDMI cables I have saved. I always have access to what I need. I was always worried about, I'm not going to have money to take care of my car, or I'm not going to be able to pay this bill, but somehow something happened, whether it was a website deal that I got or something else. And I had to find relationships between the amount of energy that I was putting into something and what got taken care of and what didn't. And regardless of whether I was worried or expansive, it got taken care of. Then I had to start to look at, well, based on all the energy I'm holding, based on, one week I'm completely depressed and the other week I'm completely abundant, the behavior is the same. I spend more. If I'm abundant, I give. If I'm depressed, I take. But it's quantify. I started to measure all of what I was spending and measure what I was spending money on. And it was all the same quantity, but it had a different feeling. So that started me down this whole philosophical exploration of how can I be prepared while still having that feeling, ideally a good feeling. And it's been a couple decades where I've had to ask these inquisitive philosophical questions to myself and wanted to maintain that level of stability and complexity and sophistication that you see in technology all of the time. When the internet first came out, the only thing we could do was instant message, and even that took a long time. So now we're at this point where we're all in separate parts of the country, streaming to this service that's streaming to 5 different places. I'm recording somehow locally to a computer that's got a hard drive that's too full. I have no idea how that's happening. And it's all working, and it's fairly seamless, except a couple little hiccups here and there. And most people don't even notice them. So as we add the ability to trust, we can then add on top of that, because we've freed up that space, whether it's in our mind, whether it's on our technology, whether it's in our wallets. And these were things I started to notice. I'm the sort of person that notices abstractions and notices sophistication and generalities. And my only real goal is to find the generality that is true in all cases, which some people say is a fool's errand, and that's a different conversation. But spreadsheets, tracking, analysis, all that is in service of that, so that I can have that sort of impulsive childlike behavior while not sabotaging the more valuable things that are truly valued, and not sabotaging the direction I want my life to go. And that's been a very tricky journey, because like I said, there's about 15 to 25 different factors of what we think about, and we can't think about them all at once. So discipline, not doing things, setting these limits, not being able to, waiting, and even having to go to the external are all symptoms of that limitation in the mind. And I didn't want to lose the benefits that come from acting out or acting abundantly, but at the same time wanted to have all the benefits that we're talking about here. So my approach now is disciplined, but the discipline gets me enough of a boost that I can trust it. And I saw your note, Casey. So let me put this question on the table and let's start to wrap up. What if we were to give the people who need it the most one piece of advice right now, if they're watching this call or this video, what would that piece of advice be? I'm going to go first. What do you guys think? Okay. Start small and stay the course. If it seems too hard, pull back, but don't stop, because that will compound.
I would say don't try to do it all yourself. I couldn't imagine if I had to figure all of this out without learning from others, whether it's, whether you hire a mentor, that's great. But for me, for a long time, that wasn't an option. I couldn't afford to hire a coach. So it was books or podcasts, that rule, you are the sum of the 5 people around you, something along those lines. I probably butchered it. But if those people aren't directly in your life, and you want to say pursue a path that no one around you has pursued, I found podcasts to be a great way to surround myself with that mindset, because it's like I'm sitting in on the conversation. So I'd say don't do it yourself. Seek out learning, seek out support. There's tons of free content on YouTube. Yes, quality varies. But explore, try stuff for yourself and see what resonates. There can be so many reasons for having trouble seeking abundance that we couldn't cover them in this hour. And dive into the little threads and the little seeds we planted, and you'll kind of intuitively know which direction to move into as you continue your learning and growth.
Casey, do you agree?
I do. I think that from what both of you said, baby steps, a baby step in the right direction or in the, the general direction that you want to go is a step you no longer have to take. And the more steps you take towards whatever those goals are, whatever that dream is that you're trying to create, the closer you're going to be every single day. And if you stay the path, even if you slow down a little bit because you get tired, fatigued, whatever, I have found in the past that I've gone through phases where things like affirmations have been really great for me to put myself in a positive mindset. And when I say affirmations, I don't mean just read them a little bit. I'm talking about listening to little short clips of like Instagram reels on repeat, just pounding it into my brain for nauseating amounts of time. But for me, it really required a shifting of my mindset and the belief that with all of the mental capacity that I had used trying to figure out how to just survive, now that I was no longer in a position of having to worry about just surviving, okay, now let's open up the imagination. Let's think about all the things that I couldn't do over the last 5, 7, 10 years, whatever, and imagine the life that I want to create, and then start taking those active steps towards it. Because like Nicole said, quite a bit ago, that, when you live without, you recognize how you can kind of stabilize yourself and ground yourself in this state of, I'm okay here. I can be content without an 85-inch flat screen or a $10,000 laptop or a $50,000 sports car, whatever those things are, recognizing that you can be okay in a state that doesn't look like what your neighbors looks like.
Mm-hmm.
The keeping up with the Joneses still exists, and recognizing that your life doesn't have to look like everybody else's for you to still be happy and content and whatnot, because not everybody wants to travel. Some people do. Some people want to go in their backyard and smoke meat every weekend for the rest of their life. And if that's what that means to you, then absolutely go for it. I went through that phase of my life, and I think I'm mostly over it now, but we'll see, what the future looks like. But just in general, it's a lot longer winded answer than I planned on, but
it's okay. That happens.
Yeah. When you get to a point that you're transitioning from, I have to make a choice between something I don't like and something else that I don't like that may or may not hurt yourself or someone else in your family, like between milk and medicine or gas and groceries, and you get to the point where you can choose, do I want to buy a new webcam for my computer? Do I want to buy this new cell phone because the camera is better? Just being able to introduce those questions is showing progress, because it's not about what do I need to survive? It's what will make me happier. What can I do more with out of these, resources?
And the truth is that we can ask those questions without having the resources. So I want to honor the point that you brought up, Nicole. I know that you have to go, Casey. I have a notification here from the system to ask all guests to stay in the studio till their recordings are done uploading. So if you have to go, I'd like to just pull your video out and put me and Nicole on for a couple minutes while the recording is uploading. And somebody, Nicole, you mentioned support. And as you were mentioning that, somebody wrote in a comment. I'm going to put it here up on the screen because I think it's worth honoring that somebody asked for support. And if, Casey, you have just 1 or 2 more minutes, I'll ask in 1 minute or less to honor our time limit. How would you answer this question? How would you address this question? And somebody else put something else, but we don't have time for that right now. Ultimately asking.
That's a great
messy
question.
Room. Yeah. So this is a practical application.
Like towards me in that?
No. I'm asking what I'm asking
expert?
is, what I'm asking is like each one of us, like, let's give a minute for this person who asked for some support. And there's another comment, but we don't have time to pull all that up, but because you have to go, Casey, I'll ask you first. Like, what is your take on what they said? And how that contributes to this feeling of abundance.
Yeah, so I think I personally found it like, like my bedroom, my office, my whatever being cluttered also like contributed to cluttering my mind and my thoughts and other things. So there was this kind of physical presence issue along with the mental presence component that kind of tied together. I don't know that it's going to be the same for everyone. And I do believe that I'm neurodivergent in a few different ways, although not diagnosed with anything in particular. I certainly have my quirks when it comes to certain things, but I think that a lot more, at least for myself, I've noticed has been tied together in ways that I didn't expect, and some that would make sense, but until you actually spend the time alone, quietly, in a space where you can just sit and feel what's going on in your body and what's causing you anxiety or negative thoughts or feelings or whatever, and consider what the possibilities can be, or have a coach that can help you shed light on some of those things, it's hard to tell what may or may not be connected in each individual person. It's very difficult.
Good. Yeah, good. And if you have to run, I can put you out of here.
Yeah, whenever you're ready.
Conversation. Yeah, I'll do that. And then Nicole, do you have a few minutes or do you have to go too?
I have a few minutes.
Okay. So awesome. This has been excellent to have this conversation, Casey. If people want to connect with you, how can they do that?
I mean, they're welcome to, connect through you. I'm on Facebook, KCL Cannell. I should be, I don't know, tagged somewhere in here or whatnot. I have two business pages that I can link in the description also, or in the, in the chat to
perfect.
connect with me there. But yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I would enjoy the rest of your evening. And Nicole, you and I will stay on, answer this last question, and then we'll end this live. Take care, Casey.
Yeah, thanks, Casey.
All right, let's switch to.
Okay.
There we go. What do you think?
I think he hit the nail on the head that it's really hard to say it for an individual. And I'll bring up one example of why, right? So Casey gave his example of how decluttering, and it sounds like, this person, it's only showing up to me as Facebook user. I don't know.
Same here. I think it's a privacy thing on the settings. Yeah.
Okay, cool. But yeah, so what the person who asked this question, it's taking up mental space, and working memory and clearing it out can free that up. Sometimes, yes. But I'm also thinking of the person who needs to see things visually for things to happen, right? And I'm kind of one of those people, right? If I put it away, it's like out of sight, out of mind. And so then I have all of this stress of like, what am I forgetting? What do I have to do? What am I forgetting? Whereas if I have it visible to me, like, oh, if it's unfinished, it's visible, I don't have that anxiety of, am I forgetting about something, right? So how I make it visible can vary from, lists on the computer to, I have a whiteboard for things that I might want to remember when I'm not looking at my computer, and I have sticky notes, and I have a whole thing going on here. But so what I would say is it is hard to tell by the individual, and sometimes the best way to find out is just to experiment.
Yeah. Yeah, right. I'll comment on this, and then I think this last question is excellent and synthesizes all of what we've talked about. So to this point, Facebook user, whoever you are, I would say I've worked with neurodivergence for several years. I've done a lot of research into it. It is individual, and there are some common themes. I will say that if you are somebody who is particularly sensitive to your environment, and in your times of negative sentiments or negative feelings or constriction, you are particularly susceptible to your environment, then it is likely that having an environment that reflects the state you want to be in rather than the state you are in is important. So if your goal is to declutter everything and give yourself more awareness, to the points of everybody that's been on this call, myself, Casey, and Nicole, you absolutely need to create the space for that awareness. Every so often, I'll erase my whiteboard. Every so often, I'll pull the sticky notes off of my wall. I had a wall full of sticky notes, and I pulled, like, they hadn't moved for like 3 months. I pulled them off, organized them, and there was a big space, and now it's full of more sticky notes with another topic, right? You can't fill a full cup, right? It's already full. So if you're looking for awareness, and if you are sensitive to your environment, yes, absolutely, this would be a good thing to do. It's absolutely true that it's not good for everybody. But this question here is incredible. In order to maintain the goal-driven ship alone, is there a way to drive, the meaningful why without, I don't know what present real to keep you accountable, but what I can get, I have a sense of what you're asking. Is it a matter of discerning your most potent times of energy and understanding when you're dysregulated and adapting? So I'm going to focus on the first part of this, and I'll answer this first. Is there a way to drive the meaningful why without this consistent, regimented accountability? Yes. And to the point that you brought up about me, Nicole, the reason I focus on spreadsheets and analysis, I'm not always spreadsheeting and analyzing, despite what people think. What I am always doing is tracking. So I have a timer running right now about this call, and I have it tagged about important metrics in my life that I want to keep track of. And there's only like 5. And then I've built a spreadsheet and built an analysis tool that will take all the time tracking and give me the information that I want from that. I don't spend time analyzing, I spend time interpreting. And I define what I want based on the way I would measure it, like we were talking about with food and weight and all those things. The way I do that, however, is so to this question, is there a way to drive the meaningful why? Yes. Aside from knowing your why, which is kind of a I can't say that word, prerequisite, you also need to make the way to get there almost, it needs to be habitual. So I don't think I'm tracking time all the time. I have 2 habits that I do that help me track time, and it's always being tracked. And that is on automatic. I don't think about it. I mean, I have to click a couple buttons, but I'm at the point, to your point about working out, where if I don't, I feel a sense of loss. I feel this ambiguity. I'm like, I'm not on point, even though I'm not even thinking about what I'm tracking. I'm just tracking what I'm tracking. So the way to do this, to maintain the goal-driven ship alone, is you need to create enough awareness, enough space to know what you want. You need to define what you want, and then you need to create a way to do that without thinking about it. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, then you're hyper-focused on accountability. Exactly. And what do you think, Nicole?
Yeah, so first I just want to drive home the fact that you are really good at this, and anybody whose mind works similarly enough to yours that they could benefit from this, I highly suggest that you reach out to Chris, join his groups, learn about his systems and his products, because it's brilliant. I've never seen anything like it. My addition to what you said is it doesn't always have to be discipline, and I would even question discipline, right? Because there's this idea that there is a certain better way to do things, right? And this came up in a mastermind that I facilitate, and it came up where someone was saying, well, have the discipline and force yourself. He's like, I don't enjoy doing certain tasks. Have the discipline, force yourself to do it. And for some people, that is a good thing.
That'll
right?
make the chicken wings end up on the table.
Yeah, so it depends. For some people, that structure and discipline helps them feel mentally healthy, more productive, more at ease. And for some people, that is a good thing because their brain works that way. For some people, structure constricts and lessens the power of your mind. Some people need freedom and ease, right? Like the typical advice is, put something in your calendar, stick to it a little bit of time each day for long-term projects, and then, eat at a certain time and wake up at a certain time. And that's really good advice for a lot of people. And that's really horrible advice for some people. And so I think a lot of it comes down to experimenting. But the point, and I've said that already, but the point I want to drive home with this question is to think about where the ideas of what is considered discipline and what is not considered discipline comes from. right? One person's idea of discipline based on what works best for them could look completely undisciplined. And what I mean is, for somebody, setting up structures, like making sure they add a certain amount of joy to their life, because only from a joyful place can they have the creativity, and the creativity is their gift that allows them to be a visionary and spark ideas, and then build a team that can handle the type A logistic stuff and create abundance for themselves that way. If someone like that tries to force themselves into a type A box, they're not doing themselves or the world a service.
Yeah, that's an excellent point about noticing how people are different and what they really benefit from. And there's a whole nother conversation that we're having around people being blinded by that. So for those of you that don't know, Nicole and I are hosting. It's not scheduled yet. It's not planned, but stay tuned. We're going to be hosting a workshop and a webinar on this topic, on how to be more focused and how to be more effective and how to do that in a way that doesn't sabotage your greatest gift. She calls it the zone of genius. I want to add one thing, which is be very mindful of the difference. It's usually actually polar opposite between your outside perspective of other and the other's inner experience. So being autistic, I'm often faced with the judgment that and you did the same thing, Nicole, and I appreciate it, that I'm hyper organized and that I'm hyper regimented and I need things my way. No, what I need is to reduce the cost of discernment, which means that I have to automate the things that are incredibly burdensome to my mental state, which means if you see me tracking time, it's not because I am judging that time. It's because that's the data that feeds my ability to reduce the cost of discernment. A lot of times, calling somebody structured, I'm not going to say that. Oftentimes, observing somebody as being structured is in service of something greater. And observing somebody be creative is in service of something greater, right? So without knowing the people, without knowing the individual, what we don't know is if they're living in their alignment or in the facilitation of it. Because every artist has to go buy their paint, metaphorically speaking. That's not actually true, but you have to find the thing that inspires you and then operate from that place. And most of the time when we are observing people from the outside, we don't know which state they're in. So yeah. Sorry, I know that was kind of what's that word? There's nowhere to go from there. But oh, cool, the same person. Here we go. Here's the end of the call.
Need more structure, but yeah, I'm so glad. Okay, so I'll read the question out first. Thank you so much for this answer, Nicole. This highly resonates with me, as I have a high level openness to open. It's quite tricky for me. I need more structure, but hate rigidity. So thank you so much for this, both Chris and Nicole. Thank you, Michael.
I know who this is too.
We got the name. Yeah. Okay, cool. Thanks, Michael, for the comment. I think, like, you're right. Like, there are benefits to having structure, knowing when it does benefit you and when it doesn't. And there are ways to approach that. So one thing I do, I'm not saying I'm the same as you, but it's resonating with me in that I have a combination of those things too. First of all, I am aware of my natural patterns of when I tend to focus better or enjoy certain tasks, right? So, Chris you and I were talking about this. In the morning, it's like if I get up, I meditate literally in bed first thing, because otherwise I'll just get so into the day that a meditation would be disruptive and I'll end up procrastinating it, right? So I'll meditate first thing. I do a fitness warm up, not a full workout. I do my full workout at another time, but I do a fitness warm up just to set my posture, get the blood flowing, and get the endorphins going. It gets me in that state where now I'm like ready to be productive. So like that's a form of structure that really works for me. Whereas one form of structure that works for a lot of people, but not for me, is to make their bed first thing in the morning. I'm just like, that is the least important, impactful thing I can do because I don't spend much time in my room. So the next time I go in there, it will be to sleep, to mess it up. So I'm just not going to. But so like having that combination for me, I have like a flexible calendar. So I calendar things out. Like I'll put it in my calendar, but I reserve the right to move them around based on how I feel. Not only how I feel, right? I consider how I feel, if it's urgent, a bunch of factors, but I will literally just reserve the right to like have this plan and then be like, don't feel like it. I'm going to move this to Friday. Like I don't have to stick to it 100%. And so I'm not saying that that's the system that will work for you. I'm saying that I'm using that as an example of a way to figure out like where and how do you need and thrive on structure, and where and how do you need and thrive on with freedom and flexibility, and sort of customize an approach that works for your neuro individuality.
Exactly. And to the point of balancing to where we started, the balancing the abundance and the scarcity, there needs to be an awareness to that too. So the only thing that I will add to that, Nicole, is I like to say to people, one instance does not a trend make. So one moment does not clarity make. In other words, part of that journey that I described for me to get me to arrive to where I am now with all these systems and analyses is looking at where I would end up if I just follow my normal pattern after a week or a month, actually tracking. In that case, it was my money, but my time and everything else. And then also saying, where do I want to be? What do I want this to look like? And track it backwards. So in any given day, I have a sense of awareness around all those tags I talked about with my time. I have a sense of awareness around where I've been lagging in one of those and where I need to pay more mind to another one. But what I don't have is at 3 o'clock, I'm doing this. I have a collection of things that are in a certain domain of my life, and I know where that balance is and where I want it to be. And those are the only two things I focus on. Where's the balance between all these parts, and where do I want it to be? And if I do that, it gives me the freedom to do almost anything else in any given moment.
I love that. That's brilliant.
So I think we already gave advice to people. We kind of took this a little bit further with a Q&A. If people want to learn more about you, let's wrap up. If people want to learn more about you, where can they find you? And do you have any last thoughts you want to leave?
Yeah, the best way to get in touch with me is just through Facebook Messenger. So I'll be tagged here. I'll make sure I'm in the comments if I don't automatically get tagged in the live on yours and Casey's page. So anybody, don't be shy. I welcome messages, and even, hey, I'm going through this. What do you think? Like I'm happy to start troubleshooting on the spot. So feel free to reach out that way. And I saw the comment here. I think that's Michael C again. I'm not sure if there's another person who's just as Facebook user, but just want to say you're very welcome. And if you want to continue this or bounce around ideas as to what could work for you, feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Thank you. And I know I'm live on your page, and we were live on Casey's, who may or may not still be streaming to his page. We are streaming to his page somehow. That's crazy. I don't understand. I mean, I do, but wow, I'm impressed. So if you want to get a hold of me, guys, you can go to christopherfern.com/group, and that'll bring you right into my Facebook group, where all of the wisdom and I'm in the group every day. It's where all the stuff that Nicole was saying, hey, I'm good at this, goes. You can also go to christopherfern.com/discover, I think, or meet. I think it's /meet now. I'm just going to check really quick. If you want to talk face-to-face, and I'm happy to do that same thing. /meet will do the trick. Not MEAT like chicken wings, MEET like hello. ChristopherFern.com/meet for a face-to-face chat. ChristopherFern.com/group for the group chat. I'm also live in that group, so you will see this video there. Okay, this has been awesome. This is unexpectedly an amazing conversation, and I really appreciate you for pulling this together, Nicole.
Thank you so much for doing it with me, and thank you to Casey, who will perhaps see this later. But I mean, you're both brilliant. I'm so glad to get all of us in a virtual room and just nerd out for a little bit. It's so much fun.
Yeah. It's good. All right, guys, take care and feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Have a good
All
one.
right. Thank you. Bye, everyone.